So I'm Jonathan Reeser. I wrote, directed, animated Division. Um, One or two cents. It's an absurdist take on the reproduction process and the rights concerning that, reproductive rights and the control of that, how basically just needs to stay with the individuals who are reproducing, who have the ability to reproduce. Um, it's kind of started out as a short story like a long time ago and then just kind of developed from there. So it started out back when I was in high school. Back then, I didn't do any film stuff. I was purely writing. And I was just started off as just like an experiment, messing with both writing body horror and writing from a second person perspective. And so it had no like social commentary at all. It was purely just exploring the like the actual like the division part, the where like it grows out of the body and then separates like that. And then over time, like the idea never went away. It just was constantly in the back of my brain as I moved into film and started animating. And it kind of developed as I started just watching more mockumentary type of things, and the idea just kind of stuck in there. And then I started adding in like the social commentary into it. It just kind of, it kind of grew in me the same way it did in the film. It was just this thing that started out as just tiny little thing, just kept growing and growing until it finally came out as a final product, a short story that was pointless, just an exercise and an experiment and a writing technique turned into a film that I actually would be willing to share. I have almost always worked alone when I was in film school. I would get like people to help with like crews if I did a live action shoot, but I always hand animated everything on my own. I've always liked just having that element of control over my work, so that was nice to direct it from my own script, from my own idea, and then knowing kind of ahead of time how I already intended on animating things. It's challenging because it's really time consuming, having to do all of that on your own, and you can't delegate any aspect to anybody else while you're doing one thing. Directing was actually nice, directing the actors, because I didn't do any actual actors. They were all people I knew. When I was writing the characters, I always imagined in my head people that I already knew delivering the lines. So I just got them and had them deliver it, and then just kind of directed them based on how I already knew they act and how I already knew they say things. Um, so that was really helpful when it came to directing the voice actors. And then I kind of based a little bit of the animation on them as well, but not as much. The animation I've pretty much always had in my head for a long time, so that wasn't as influenced by the people that I wrote it around. So when I first wanted to go into film, I had no intention of being an animator originally. My key change from writing into film was David Lynch and his type of movies. I love surrealism. And then I saw Don Hertzfeldt, his feature "It's Such a Beautiful Day," which does a very similar like stick figure style. I added a little more like depth. It was a combination of his stick figures with my dad always did a lot of puppet work when I was a kid. So I kind of based them on like taking the design of a puppet and minimalizing it down to almost like a stick figure aesthetic. Um, and I find a lot more freedom in animation than I ever did in live action, because I can just think of an idea and I can just draw it. Um, that's one of the few films I do. I like changing my style as well. I have a lot of different art styles. So I have stop motion films I did of like mannequins, pieces, and things like that. I've done scratch animation before. So I kind of more base my style and develop it around what the film is more so than something that I've already predetermined. So when I did Division, um, because I knew the comedic elements were going to be important and I couldn't lean too heavily into like body horror, I knew I had to do a more minimalist, cartoony style, because if I present these things ripping off of people's bodies and more realistic, less cartoonish, it's suddenly going to stop being comedic and lean more into horror. And I thought the comedy elements were important to keep the tone where it needed, because if you go too horror, in my opinion, with something like this, the social commentary is not going to sit as easily. I think comedy is a great method for delivering social commentary. It keeps people a little looser and more open to it. So that's why I did that specific style for this one. The Office, I watched a lot of Office when I was writing that. I've always loved that series. This is Spinal Tap. I was always a big metalhead as a kid, so that was a big influence. Being able to take something I know and being able to laugh at it is helpful for me. And I'm really into the work of Peter Watkins. He's a much more serious pseudo documentarian. He made Punishment Park, which is one of my favorite films. So he's a big influence when it comes to the pseudo documentary style. Surrealism, big influence. I already mentioned David Lynch being my key inspiration for going into film. Dadaism inspires me more with my less narrative work because Dadaism is about randomness. It's about kind of creating a pure random artistic spirit. So I don't think it really works narratively. Some people have tried it. The Unshi and Andalou was an attempt of merging Dadaism with surrealism, and I love that short film, but it doesn't really. You can't make it again. Like it's a perfect entity that really can't be replicated. Um, so Dadaism more of my experimental animation, not really anything in this film. This film was inspired, I'd say, more by surrealism mixed with absurdity. Kafka is my favorite author. He's probably my biggest inspiration ever. So kind of merging reality with this surreal fragment of reality, this kind of parallel existence where it seems very similar to our reality, but it's just slightly off. It's dreamlike but realistic, where it still follows its own rules and doesn't have a pure dream spirit, but it's clearly not connected to the world as we know it. So I have two big things I'm working on. One is an experimental feature I've been editing for about 4 years now. It started off with live action things I shot while I was still in film school and some things I've shot afterwards. And it's just kind of been this Frankenstein monster of footage I've been putting together. That one's just been ongoing. I don't know when that will even be done. I keep losing motivation for it. I hate it and then I love it again. I hate it again. I get no idea and it makes me love it again. So when it's finally done, I don't know if I'm even going to love it enough to release it. The other project I'm working on is I'm working on a script adapting Kafka's Metamorphosis. As an animated film, I'm going to base the animation on old Czech animation because he's like one of the biggest cultural influences on Czech, and Czech film was also a really big influence on me. So kind of just a love letter both to Czech art and Czech animation, as well as Kafka, who is so near and dear to me personally. So I'm currently working on the script for that. I'm working on like the designs. I'm hoping that one I'll actually get like a real budget for, get like some funding, so I can get bigger voice actors, some people who can perform this, because this is going to be a much more. I want to be much more professional than anything I've ever done because it's a project and a book and something that means so much to me that I want it to be as good as I can make it. My advice might seem weird, but it comes from my personal experiences in film school. And that is sometimes your professors don't always know best. My school had a pretty strong focus, especially when it came to screenwriting, on traditional narrative structure, on pretty basic. This is the 3 points. You have this basic character progression. It has to hit all these notes, and then you just kind of you have the pretty your base is already set up. You just kind of get to decide the aesthetics of your building a little bit. And that didn't work for me because I've never been a big fan of the traditional three act structure. I've always liked existential projects and existential stories where maybe the point is that people don't change. Maybe the point is that we keep doing these things and it doesn't ever work out for us. That's what I read a lot of as a kid. That's what I keep reading. That's what I'm really inspired by. And so what I did was I didn't really care so much about my grades and I just wanted to make the things I wanted to make. And luckily after that I got a really good professor who saw that and helped me develop that. And I just had to get through that point in time where I just didn't have to care so much. And so my advice would be figure out who you are as an artist and what you like and what you care about, and don't really listen as much to anybody else beyond the basic, like, hey, this isn't like working out in this specific way, like technical details. But don't let anyone tell you what themes, your aesthetic, your structure has to be like be true to what your art is, and that's more important than anything else.